And I've been told in another area certain things about the phenomenon that are quite disturbing. I mean, there are a lot of people privately claiming to me things about the implications of the phenomenon that go beyond, far beyond the whole notion of just, I mean, I wish it was as simple as extraterrestrials getting in their little spaceships and flying from Zeta Reticuli and coming to this planet. That's the easy explanation.
The entry point for like UFOs for people is because if they saw something in the sky, you know. Then the second thing is, oh my gosh, you know, aliens, you know, they're coming from other planets. And then people kind of like stop there. The evidence of these things is really pointing that these things aren't coming from planets. The past, present, and future exist at one moment. So that means you can laterally step back and forth depending on frequency. We can't do this, but something else can.
He did some really interesting analysis that he shared with us. He said, we conducted an experiment to see if the energy generated by the UFO could affect time. We synchronized two quartz timepieces, attached the opposite ends of a metal rod, placed one of the timepieces inside the UFO landing circle, and one was left outside, and inside the circle, time speeded up. We repeated the results with mechanical timepieces.
And I've already spoken about this to some extent, so I will say it involves the notion of future human time travel.
Yeah, and they also time travel, which is different than what people think in like a movie where they sit in a machine and all of a sudden you're in the 1930s and you got to go save humanity. When you use the technology, there's a time difference between what they're doing inside of an artificially created bubble of gravity of sorts, and then what's on the outside. So if you're on the inside of one of those machines, everything would be skewed more black and white. There would be like a red shift, and everybody would look frozen. So you literally could fly around and grab a Coke out of someone's hand and put it in someone else's hand. It's really...
Where are you getting this from?
Well, take a wild guess. Look at the people I'm surrounded by, you know.
There's another impact which sometimes I hesitate to mention, but I think it's true, and I think it clearly has been shown in some experiments without people thoroughly understanding them. When you add extra dimensionality, or look at the extra dimensionality of it, you can model a living system as a particular extra 3 space attached to this 3 space. So in infinite dimensions, you can have an infinite number of these 7 spaces. And that'll allow you to model a mind actually connected to the living body. Well, that's interesting because it means if you choose the right engineering in this hyperspace, you can engineer the mind directly. And there are some experiments that even imply this. There are some that show that you can do things with cells. For example, you can time reverse the cells back to a previous state and cure diseases. Priori did that. And several other researchers have shown aspects of it. Robert Becker, for example, was nominated for a Nobel Prize for showing little tiny DC currents and little DC potentials we can separate into this stuff by, you know, applying the Whittaker approach, decomposition. He showed very conclusively that you can just take cells and reverse them backwards to a previous state or forward to a future state, called differentiation and dedifferentiation. He should have been given a Nobel Prize for that work. That's magnificent work. It's a tragedy that he wasn't. But we have effects which can get down now into the very fundamental thing that drives everything, the mind stuff, the connection of the mind to the body and everything. For example, if you were to generate extreme pulses, extreme powerful pulses of this so-called scalar potential stuff with the hidden internal stuff, if you jerk that hard enough, you jerk the normal smooth flow of time stream, and what you really do is you snap the body loose from its mind connection.
My hypothesis is that these people who are driving these UFOs, or at least the people who designed them, have a technology that's more advanced than ours. I mean, I think that's obvious that they're more advanced than our technology. Their technology is so advanced that they have figured out a way to artificially warp space-time the way a black hole does, only without all the gravitational effects that rip things apart into their constituent atoms. So that they can actually manipulate, they have some sort of a generator in here, so that they can actually produce this field around their craft like a little bubble, a little private universe that they carry around with them. So that they can actually step out of normal space-time into their own private universe and then step back into it at other coordinates. So if that's possible, then they can not only come from all these distant places, but they can also come from parallel universes that coexist with ours and we're not able to see because they're on a different vibrational level or whatever. They can even come, probably, from our own past or our own future. Because as the quantum physicists are telling us now, the past, present, and future are not separate. Our idea of the stream of time is only an artifact of our consciousness. It is our consciousness that's traveling. It isn't that things are happening cause and effect in a linear fashion. It is our consciousness that's doing that. So the past and future actually exist simultaneously with us, and if you're able to warp space-time, you can travel to and from them. Time is not linear. In fact, it doesn't exist.
Well, I have said before on film, I don't believe it's a UFO cover-up. I believe that it's a time travel cover-up.
When you say that time travel is the real agenda here, not that we've been visited all this other technology out there, why do you still say that time travel is the real agenda here, though?
Well, time travel is the cover-up because sitting at this table, which I will explain maybe further later, I was tricked into it by the head of the black projects for the Air Force. And I can mention his name. He probably wouldn't mind, but I won't. And I was sitting at this table with Dalai Lama's representatives, with military representatives, with scientific representatives, and the man that was heading this up, he wanted to release time travel to the universities. And he makes all the transformers for the Philadelphia experiment. His name is Mr. Beckworth. He's passed about 4 years ago. And we're sitting at this table, and I'm tricked into the head of the table, and I say, what the hell is going on? Why am I here? So the colonel from the black says, just sit, Phil, and answer these guys' questions. So it goes around the table. Should they reveal Mr. Beckworth's time travel machine to the universities to study? Should they make it public, in other words? And everybody voted on it, and they wanted to know what I thought about it. And I said, well, it's very simple. I work on aircraft. They go from point A to point B. No questions asked. But in time travel, you have to have a benevolent reason to go from point A to B. Otherwise, you bring back excess of baggage. The Dalai Lama's representative stood up and he says, I told you military people that. They're having problems. That's what the meeting is about.
Imagine if you were somebody in the US defense and intelligence establishment that was aware of that quite insane sounding idea that this might be a time thing, a future war thing. And imagine if you're worried that anything you do might jeopardize that time stream.
Look, there's a hidden universe all around us. And you know, it's always been right in front of our face. Fractals is one of those things when you look at random chaos as a blueprint. When you see fractal patterns, and I'm gonna go a little bit into this if you don't mind. We see fractal patterns not just in nature. We see it, of course, you know, if you look at the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio and things like that, and fractals. We see fractals in the vein structure of leaves. We see fractals in the pattern that a lightning bolt takes through the sky. We see fractals in the path that rainwater takes down a mountainside. It's all fractals. In fact, there are fractals when you look at the human nervous system and you look at the brain, neurons in the brain, that's fractals. That's a fractal pattern. And in fact, if you were to compare the smallest parts of our body, whether it's the alveoli in our here, or the capillaries in our circulatory system or the neurons in our brain, and then compare that image, that exact image of any human being's fractal patterns of the brain, and compare that to the supercluster galaxy patterns, that the patterns of super galaxies that are separated by hundreds of millions of light years, right? It's the exact same pattern.
Scale invariant.
Now, what does that tell you? Now, furthermore, socially and psychologically, those patterns still exist. When you look at a link diagram analysis of a terrorist cell network, you see that fractal pattern. It's even in our, it's so innate to us that even subconsciously our behaviors are tied to that fractal nature. So when you see something that is as common as that, so pervasive in our universe, one must say, okay, that is one of the many fundamental principles of our universe, that it is the way we operate. We collectively, all of the universe, at least this universe here, operates. That's one example. I think fractals are sure, because I think when you talk about this topic, I think when we finally really begin to appreciate and understand more details about this, there's going to be probably some fractal natures to it.
If they're changing reality,
excessive baggage. Remember that word I said? That is in a benevolent universe, there is no paradox where you go back and kill your father and you don't exist. It's very, very involved, and I don't think we should go into that direction right now.
Okay, but if there were changes going on in this reality, would I know the difference if someone's gone back in time, for example, and changed something in the past, and they come back to this time? They're never coming back to the same timeline. They're not coming back to my time. They're going back to a parallel universe.
Well, that's the way it works. Let me explain it real quick, if I may. You go back in time. Do you come forward in that same parallel? No. You're growing forward in a different parallel. You go back again, you're growing in, and you say, well, what's that got to do with this first timeline?
Right.
What has one wave got to do with the other wave?
Right.
It changes it.
It does ripple across.
It does ripple across, yeah. And that's the way reality works. With one timeline, only with one timeline.
Ведь я думал переделать их, а переделали-то меня по своему образу и подобию. Раньше будущее было только продолжением настоящего, а все перемены маячили где-то там, за горизонтами. А теперь будущее слилось с настоящим. Разве они готовы к этому?